I got him into a leadership position, and that almost cost my business. He was not a good leader. He didn't like it, but he loved the pay raise. So he got it because of the money. And then we both realized a couple of years later that was a huge mistake. And a lot of people quit because of that. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I think that is probably the most common mistake that leaders make. You can be the subject matter expert doesn't mean that you have to be in management or leadership position. You could be great at what you do, but to be a leader, to manage others, you have to have a passion for helping others and supporting others and having a vision.
Welcome to the Leaders in Tech podcast. I am your host, David Mancilla. This podcast is dedicated to acknowledge the leadership that we have in technology and the technology industry that is making this world a better place. When I started this podcast, I realized that there was a lot of technology podcasts in the market, but they were talking specifically about technology. And nothing that talks about the leadership. And for me, it's the most important part, because without leaders like the guests that I have today, we wouldn't be able to have the technologies that we have today that is actually making us all better. So with that, I would love to introduce my guest, Sep. Brother, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, David. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast.
Beautiful. Sep, tell me, for the audience, can you give me your full name? Where do you live and what do you do for a living?
Sure. My full name is Sepehr Salimi, and I go by Sep. I live in Newton, in Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. And I am a portfolio manager for a technology and venture lending group. So we provide venture debt and other lending solutions to technology companies and high growth venture-backed companies.
Fantastic. I remember when I was doing the screening interview with you, how interesting your role was in the whole ecosystem. Because without financial institutions like yours, we wouldn't be able to do a thing. I myself am an angel investor, and I have invested in many startup companies. I started with my own companies, and then I realized that I could actually help other people too. But it's a blessing when we see enterprises like yours also pitched in and give, take the risk to give entrepreneurs like us build technologies for the world.
Yeah, sure.
So let's go back in your life, because doing what you're doing and being in the position you are with such a young age, it takes a while. Tell me, where were you when you were in high school? What was your line of thinking? What did you want to do with your life back then?
So the first 2 years of high school, I was born in Iran, and I was still in Iran until the age of about 16. And we came to the United States, I was 17. So we lived in Ukraine for about a year and a half, and I finished high school here in the United States. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I knew a few things. I knew that I have an entrepreneurial mind, and I like to help people. I knew that I didn't want to be poor. So those kind of like had some ideas, but I didn't really know what to do. And, certainly when you when you're new to a country that is vastly different than where you were born and raised, it makes it a lot harder because, I didn't really know how to approach colleges and the job market and how to plan my future.
Wow. And what happened after that?
So finished high school, went to college. At the time, again, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, what major. And, one of my primary decisions or deciding factors were the cost, because, I was still working full-time, working 2 jobs and, paying for my college. So I ended up going to a small college in Massachusetts, Anna Maria College. And the advice that I got was go into business administration, go into finance. And I'm not sure if that was a good advice, but it was the only advice that I got at the time, because they said, you get a finance degree, you'll have a job. Every company, every industry will need a finance leader. So to some degree, that's true. If I probably wouldn't give that advice to someone else. I always say, like, follow your passion, and the money and job and security follows. But it actually works out for me because I ended up really enjoying finance. So I got my MBA. I, got a job in commercial banking as an analyst, working with small businesses at the beginning, and then working with businesses in different industries. So I really enjoyed it, and I kind of like moved up. And it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that the technology piece kind of entered the picture, and I started working with tech-enabled companies.
Tech-enabled companies. Now, you said that you are from Iran, right? What
Yes.
Change? Like, when did you arrive into the United States, and how did you actually manage to do that migration change? Because it's not easy. I did it when I was 19 years old, so that's why I ask. It wasn't easy for me.
Yeah, it's never easy. Certainly the cultural shock, and I came again at the age of 17. So I think sometimes it's easier if you come earlier. You can kind of like you can grow into the culture. It gets harder as you later in life. And I think it was certainly easier for me than it was for my mother or some of my friends who came here later in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, because they had already built a life. It's really hard to adapt later in life. So I think one of the biggest things for me was trying to fit in, being at the age that I felt kind of ashamed of being different, right? And I didn't feel, and years later, 10 years, 11 years later, I went back to my country to visit family, and I had this like horrible feeling of like I don't belong to my culture, to Iran, because I don't understand that. You kind of like, you start your personality, your culture starts shaping in the later in life. So I didn't understand a lot of things, and I came back here, and I was like, oh my God, I'm constantly trying to fit in and belong to something, and I don't. And at some point, I think I came to the realization that being what differentiates me from the rest of the people, and this is certainly true for every single individual, regardless of where you were born, that gives you your uniqueness, right? Like, I am unique because of who I am. I don't have to belong to one specific culture or country or society. I can certainly belong to multiple ones. So it took me a long time. I would say it took me like probably until like 5 years ago to adjust to that and feel that I belong to this country.
One of the things that defines a leader is the capacity to enable change in one's life, and yeah. I think that's why a lot of leaders, especially in technology, one of the most exceptional leaders, they are people that have come from other countries. If you look who's the CEO of major corporations like Google and Microsoft,
yeah,
they are all immigrated to this country at some point. And it's because of that, right? Like, a leader creates a path,
yeah,
that everybody else follows. So you break the ground and you start making a way where there is no way. I remember exactly feeling the same way as you were feeling. I came back home. I'm from Guatemala. I think, at least for us, cultures are different, but not as different as Iran. For example, North America tends to be a Christian-based country, and I came from a Christian-based country. So in religion, for example, I found similarities, but the language was different, the people were different, the food was different, the way to communicate culturally was different too. And I remember when I was going back home, especially after I graduated college, because after I finished college, I was more Canadian than I was really Guatemalan. And I remember going back home and my old friends wouldn't understand me. And I felt this sense of loss. I was mourning my old culture. And then I come back here and I never really felt like I fitted, like I belonged, because I didn't have the background growing up here as a kid. Interesting, right?
Yeah. And it's, to your point, I mean, like most successful companies and leaders who lead those companies are the ones that embrace diversity. And I think a lot of companies, they use diversity as a PR tool. But if you truly embrace diversity of people with different mindsets, all of them can sit at the table and disagree with each other and bring ideas to the table. Those are the most successful leaders and companies. And that's what I've learned. And I think there's no substitute to diversity and inclusion.
For sure. And that's what made these countries amazing, right? If you look at US and Canada, it's a melting pot of multiple nationalities, right? And that's what makes
Agreed.
it beautiful,
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
So your first job as a financial analyst, what was the first obstacle? How do you start learning to become a leader? Because you must have had people above you that were guiding you.
Yeah, so I think one of the obstacles was, wanting to or thinking that I know everything or I can do everything on my own. And I had to learn very quickly that, it's better to kind of like ask for help from others and adopt mentors and people want to be helped. I think a lot of people don't want to ask, whether it's that pride or whatever it is. But being able to ask other people, that kind of like put me on a fast track with my career, because people also don't know what your goals are. And if you say what your goals are and, they're willing to help you, they're willing to mentor you. So the first year as an analyst I think it was very difficult because there was a lot that I didn't know, but I didn't want to look incompetent. So, I tried really hard. I remember there were so many nights, sitting in the basement in my cubicle, banging my head against a wall, trying to figure things out. But that was also that's also part of why I like that job, because, being an analyst, you have to figure things out. So it's very rewarding.
We're talking about leadership in technology, and being an analyst, that was one of my first jobs, actually, right? One of the roles that I had was being a programming analyst, but I didn't really know what the term analyst meant until I actually was in the job, and I realized I knew nothing about analysis. And it's one of the greatest skills that I developed. Talking about technology, again, if you're not able to analyze, to do research, if you're not able to do comparison and logical thinking, you are completely dead. And for sure, you won't be able to be a good leader.
Yep, agreed.
Right? And when was the first time that you were able to lead other people?
So before, while I was still in college, I worked at restaurants and gas stations, and then ultimately I was in customer service. And I think every job that I had, and by the way, a little bit of a distinction between leadership and management. I do think they're a little bit different. Management is, managing projects and other people, and leadership is you don't have to be in a position of leadership to lead other people. And so, every job that I had, I never went in as a manager or as a leader. I kind of like moved up through the ranks by showing initiative, showing that I care, putting in 150%. So I had my first experience as a manager was way back. I was still in second year of college. I was at a gas station, and I had the opportunity to manage other people. And Looking back now, I think I was a horrible manager, and there were a lot of things that I learned. A lot of mistakes that I made, and certainly helped me later on with other positions when I was in management or leadership positions.
Actually, I think the first times that we become leaders or even managers, we all make mistakes, and I think our bosses know that, and they allow us to fail miserably so that we can learn our lessons with some guiding rails, right? Some guiding rails for sure. One of the biggest mistakes that I made, for example, as a leader, is promoting somebody in the group that didn't have leadership material. This person was an incredible computer scientist, and he was the best. And because he was the best at doing writing software and creating architecture, I got him into a leadership position, and that almost cost my business. He was not a good leader. He didn't like it, but he loved the pay raise. So he got it because of the money. And then we both realized a couple of years later that was a huge mistake. And a lot of people quit because of that. Can you imagine? Yeah,
I think that is probably the most common mistake that leaders make. You can be the subject matter expert doesn't mean that you have to be in management or leadership position. You could be great at what you do, but to be a leader, to manage others, you have to have a passion for helping others and supporting others and having a vision. So, just because you're an expert in your area doesn't mean that you want that or you will be good at it.
That's wonderful. So tell me, how you ended up being a leader in the financial field, lending money to startup companies? How did that happen? Because that's, when you're managing a portfolio of money that for the enterprise that you represent is hard. Like for me, well, I have been blessed financially. I've been able to generate a lot of wealth in my life. And I'm deploying that wealth according to the risk that I'm willing to manage. And, most of the times it doesn't materialize into any fruition, but one or those two investments does 10, 20, 30x, and it pays for everything else, but I know what I'm doing. So that if I lose the money in a wrong investment in a startup that went bankrupt, I'm okay because I'm willing to take that risk. But that's different because it's my own money. You are managing the bank's money, and that's hard, man. Like that's really hard because it's somebody else's money.
That it sure is. And I never forget the first job as an analyst, the chief operating officer of the bank. I used to, prepare a report and go present it to him. And he said, "Tell me, Sep, if this was your grandmother's money, would you lend the money?" And it kind of caught me off guard because I'm like, wait, my grandmother's money? I don't know, because it's my grandmother. So you kind of have to treat it with the same perspective that this isn't just some bank's money and I'm getting paid to be here. Your primary job is to protect the financial institution's assets while providing the best service, the best solution to the client. And so I think what eventually got me where I am today is always willing to go in the extra mile and raising my hand and working. So I had the opportunity and the privilege to work in different groups. So the first time as an analyst, I worked on a loan request for a tech-enabled company. Was probably 6-7 years ago, and I knew nothing about technology. And if you're in the technology industry, that it's widely different than a lot of other industries. It's very different than real estate, very different than manufacturing. So I raised my hand and I said, I want to work on this. And so I worked on it, and a lot of hours and asking questions, and I kind of took the same approach with everything else. I always I raised my hand. I was never content. So that kind of allowed me to expand my knowledge, my expertise, and ultimately people in leadership, they took a leap of faith in me and allowed me to, be where I am today.
That's wonderful. When you started saying yes or no to lending money to startup companies, did you have like handrails where you could, you couldn't mess up royally, or they just allowed you to do whatever you like?
So that's what's really hard, right? You're in a position that, so if your company, if you come to me and you apply for a loan, I have to be able to give you an answer early on, because I want to be respectful of your time, right? I can't take my time, go through the process, underwrite the loan, hand you a big legal invoice and then say, no, we can't do this, because then that's kind of like my reputation. So I have to know, there are early indications. I have to know what to look for. And, I think most companies appreciate it when I tell them, look, this is not something I can do, but I think you should talk to so-and-so, because I'm being respectful of their time. I'm not wasting their time. And certainly if it's something that we can do, it's, I think by now I know very well what I can or can't do. And that's what makes a great lender.
That's a beautiful point. And I know a lot of startup CEOs are listening to this podcast. Can you tell me, on a highlight level, what parameters, let's say I'm a startup company, I'm coming to get a loan to build my software company to you. What parameters are you looking for in a company for you to enable yourself to lend money to this company?
Sure. So ultimately, debt is a form of capital. And this is helpful for entrepreneurs and business owners. Any form of capital, whether it's equity or debt or quasi-debt form of capital, you have to look at it, you have to understand why you want this capital, right? When it comes to equity, I think a lot of business owners think that once they are able to raise equity, that makes them successful, which is not true. You have to be able to put the equity into work, and that equity has to unlock doors for you that would have taken you so much longer, maybe 10 years. You're unlocking all of those years in a year. And in a field like technology that is changing at a very fast pace, that could be a matter of survival, right? That the technology that if you can't unlock that door in a year, someone else will. When it comes to debt, it's similar philosophy, except debt is a little bit different. It allows you to hypothetically speaking, it allows you to maximize your profitability, but it also has an added risk, because debt is a fixed obligation, meaning that regardless of what happens to your business, you have to pay that back, right? So because it's a fixed obligation, you have to look at it a little bit differently. And is this something, so if I'm borrowing $1 and I have to pay back 10 cents a year, if I'm going to take that 10 cents and turn it into 15 or 20 cents, then that adds value to me and my shareholders. But if I can't, if I'm borrowing $1, I have to repay 10 cents a year, but I'm only able to generate 5 cents, then I'm losing money. So it's not always maximizing. And that's why I said hypothetically speaking. In a hypothetical situation, debt will allow you to maximize your profits. So some of the things that you can look at, and this is different from one industry to another, this is specifically for technology leaders, is some of the metrics you can look at. If you're looking for capital or a form of capital to grow your business, you want to look at the ratio of ARR, or annual recurring revenue, to debt. Typically, 1-to-1 time. So if your company, you have 20 million revenue, you don't want to borrow more than 20 million, and it's unlikely that you can anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, if it's a cash flow generating company and you're using EBITDA as a proxy for cash flow, you want to look at your ratio of EBITDA to debt, or you want to look at the ratio of the debt that you're raising to total capital that you have put in and your shareholders have put in. And so those are just some of the kind of like back of the envelope analysis that you can do to make sure that you're not borrowing more than you are capable to repay. So you're taking your capacity into consideration. And there's of course a lot more that goes into it, but that's kind of I think that's a good start.
That's beautiful. And it's important because I remember when I was starting my company, I was looking for loans and I couldn't understand why nobody will give me a loan. But I had no clients. I just had a business plan. And the business plan wasn't the best either, so my God, 20 years later, and now I realize all the mistakes that I've done. But it's important. It's important because the first thing that one of my mentors told me was, when you're in business, and you're a leader in business, the first thing that you need to do is become friends with the bank and make sure you ask for money when you don't need it. And that's exactly what I did. Once I started building my company, I went past $1 million in sales and $500,000 in net revenue. Then I went to the bank with my EBITDA, with my sales, and I asked for a line of credit. And I think they serviced 50% of my EBITDA or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't need it because I had a lot of savings in the bank. However, I only did it because of my mentors. They told me, do this. And this is, again, a good leader is not only the person that gives advice and makes people do the common objective of the group, but it's also somebody that is willing to listen, not only to their mentors, but also their own people. When I hire people, I actually try to hire people that are better than me in the area of expertise that I'm hiring, so that they can advise me, so I can take the right decision. So in this case, I actually went and got that line of credit. Little did I know that 5 years later, it saved me from bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Because now I had access to that capital. It was sitting there. There was a recession. I needed the money to do payroll, and I was able to go through. And then the business recovered and I paid it all back.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And, that line of credit is, having that as an insurance policy. It has saved so many businesses, and I've seen it so many times. I can't recommend enough, even if you don't need it, and especially if you don't need it, getting that line of credit in place. And being a business owner is not easy, David. You have to know so many things. You have to be either an expert or have an understanding in different areas, right? It's not just your product. You have to have a good understanding of finance and the economy of your business. You have to have a good understanding of how to sales and marketing, and how to market your products and services, and so many other areas. So you hit the nail in the head. Really recruiting people that are better than you and not being threatened by them and listening to them is the key to success. And that's one of the things that I've certainly learned. I've always been lucky and fortunate that I've worked with a team of experts that they've all certainly have been better and smarter than me. I mean, that's true today, the group that I'm in, highly intelligent people, and you have to fully trust them and provide them with the support when they need it, but listen to them and take their advice.
That's beautiful. Listen, Sep, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to abuse it. Let me ask you one last question before we finish the podcast. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Oh, wow. That's a lot of pressure. So this better be good. So let me think about it. I would write two things. I would write, one, be kind, and two, don't fear doing the right thing. And those are the two things that, the two principles that I've certainly learned, and I use it or try to apply it to my life every day. Being kind, and people confuse that with being nice. You certainly can be nice, but you don't have to be. Being kind is a necessity, because we are, what we do, how we help others become better will benefit the community, and it's a full circle. It benefits us. So we all move up and move forward together. It's not about like individual goals, and then not fearing of doing the right thing, I think, is also important, because people know what the right thing is. And, whether it's a very personal thing, it's a right thing for me is right now is to start my own business. And I've been thinking about this for the last 10 years and I just haven't done it. The right thing for me is to quit my job because I have an abusive boss and I need to do this for myself, my sanity. Or it could be a right thing. I need to speak up because I see my employer is doing something unethical. Regardless of what it is, we all know what the right thing is. But I think often what happens is we fear of the consequences. What happens if I speak up? I might lose my job. What happens if I quit my job? I won't have an income. What if I start my business and I fail? And those are all of those what ifs kind of like stops us or prevents us from doing the right thing. So I would say definitely don't fear doing the right thing.
That's amazing. And be kind. It's, beautiful advice, in my faith. We follow, do unto others what you would like others to do unto you. Right? And
very true.
Loving your neighbor as you love yourself. It's one of the foundations of Christianity. And if only people were to do that, being kind. And and it's funny because I've been in this earth for 51 years. And I noticed that if I am kind to people, they tend to be kind back to me. If I'm mean to somebody, they are mean back to me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, it's to your advantage to be kind, but to be genuinely kind. Even if people don't treat you right, you're kind, it goes back to you.
Yeah.
It's inevitable, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
If people would love to hear more about you, your organization, or they're interested in getting into business with you, where can they find you online?
Sure. So I work for a regional bank in Northeast Massachusetts, New Hampshire mainly. The name of the bank is Cambridge Trust Company. And I oversee the innovation banking group portfolio. So they can go on the Cambridge Trust Company website, find my contact information, send an email. I'm also on LinkedIn. They can look me up on LinkedIn. If you send me a message, if you're an entrepreneur, business owner, you want to reach out to me, you have any questions, no strings attached, you just want to know, have a general question, please do reach out. I'm happy to help. LinkedIn and email are the best ways to reach me.
Fantastic. Brother, thank you so much for your time. Keep being an amazing leader that you are and helping companies get to the next level for financing. God bless.
Thank you very much, David. It was great talking to you, and you have a good day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.